Okay, so happy International Women's Day 2021 to everyone here. We'd like to welcome everyone of all genders to be with us today for this interactive event. And we hope that you take away a lot of practical tips and ways to overcome imposter syndrome today. Uh, we have more than almost 200 people signed up, and there are a ton of people joining every second with us. So we want to welcome all of you. I want to share and introduce the 6 colleagues that I really trust and really appreciate their support for making this event possible today. And so I'll go through them one by one. It's been a true team effort. And I would like to ask each of them to just maybe wave as I say their name, and also possibly to unmute yourself if you feel that talented quickly, so that the camera goes to you for a second. I also want to thank all of the career colleagues that are on this event today, because I recognize so many faces and names as we're getting started. And I know there's a lot of talent in the room as well. So please feel free to chime in and share your insights as well as we will share ours. So let me introduce our team. Then I will give a bit of information about how the event will run, and then we will get started. First of all, we have Ruth Winden from across the pond in England. And Ruth helped us last year as well. And we want to say welcome to you and thank you for helping us make this truly international. Next, we have Michelle Carroll, who's in warm, sunny Florida, which I'm sure we all wish we were in Florida right now, but we're not. Want to wave and say a quick hello?
Hello. Hi, everyone.
Excellent, thank you. And then we have Lynn Carroll, who is in Pennsylvania, where it's just a little bit colder.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here.
Excellent. And Lynn and Michelle share the same last name, but are not related, just for the record. Next, we have Karen Chopra. And as I mentioned, Karen made a handout for all of us at the end. I should have stopped talking when you waved, sorry, Karen. But she made a handout that will be awesome, so you don't have to worry about taking a lot of notes. I also want to give a little kudos out for a few of my colleagues who have books. So Karen has written a book called Salary Negotiation and Other Workplace Negotiations. And she also this past summer created a course on salary negotiation. I have read the book and taken the course. In fact, I'm happy to say that I am the first person to be earning that certification this summer. Both are written for the career counselor in mind, but anyone could read the book and take the course and benefit from the information. So just a quick plug. And Karen, I'll ask you to put the link to your book in there so it doesn't seem like self-promotion. I am asking you, please do that. And then next we have Sherazad Aristay. And Sherazad is going to be helping us monitor the chat today. And as I mentioned, everyone I'm introducing will be running one of the breakout groups. So you'll see have a chance to meet with people a little bit in a smaller group setting. Sherazad also has written an amazing book called Nourish Your Career. And she wrote it about 10 years ago. And I think a second edition is coming out. So keep an eye out for that. And then last but not least, we have Alana Tolpin-Levitt, who helped. Alana helped create all the PowerPoints for this, and really everyone had a part to play. And so I really thank all of the support. But I do want to mention that Alana also has a book that's really cool about women and daughters, moms and daughters, and how it affects your career, called What's Mom Still Got to Do With It? And it's also a really, I have three sisters and a mom, and still living, thankfully. And it's a really insightful book. So I encourage you to check out those books and resources, and just help me give a round of applause for everyone who is helping me present today. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. For the audience, for the team, if you may remember if you were on this event last year, and I think definitely some of the people, I see some names that I recognize from last year. We did an event on how to bolster your career, 7 tips. It was a whirlwind hour, and we gave a lot of information really fast. This year, we decided to really focus on one specific thing, make it more interactive, and make it more impactful so that you walk away with something. And so that's what we're doing today with this imposter syndrome 3 steps in how to overcome it. And so to walk you through a little bit, we're going to take a poll in a minute. We have a couple of polls. The polls are anonymous, so you don't have to worry about anyone seeing your answer, including me as the host. No one will see it. We'll just see totals. So we'll see the accumulation of the answers, and all of us will see that. We also are going to, about halfway through this event, after we talk about a little bit about what imposter syndrome is and a little bit about where it comes from. We're not going to get too much into that because that could be a whole nother session that you could hire Alana for if you would like. But we're just going to get a little snippet here. And then we will break out into 6 breakout groups and run an activity. Lynn is going to walk us through the activity first. And if you're watching this after the fact, after the event has happened, you can try the method yourself as Lynn goes through it. But then I will pause the recording. We will go out into breakout groups. Nothing in the breakout group is recorded, not the chat, not the voices. So you have total anonymity in that regard. And I hope we have some candid and fruitful discussions. Then we will come back and debrief, share some tips. Ruth will share some tips on some takeaways to help you as you move forward, because as we'll talk about, you don't overcome it forever. You don't erase imposter syndrome, but you can fight it each time you feel it creeping up inside of you. And then we will wrap it up. And so this is a 75-minute session. Karen is going to help keep us on time as the taskmaster to keep us focused. And my clock is ticking away. So I am going to jump forward and run the first poll. And you should be seeing it now. So I'm going to give about a minute for people to answer this. And so far, it looks like many people have heard of it. Although, interestingly, I practiced with my family last night, the breakout groups. And afterwards, my mother said, "What is imposter syndrome?" Which shocked me that she did not know what that was. So I had to give a little mini course last night to my family, because I also had a few other family members. Okay, it's looking like the numbers are big, and I'll give it 2 more seconds, but I have a feeling that everyone has chimed in because the numbers are quite large. Okay, I'm going to end it. And everyone should see. Give me a thumbs up, Lynn, because you're on my screen chat. Okay, excellent. So that means you can see it. So 75 people, 81%, so almost a large majority of people on this event have heard of it, so that's great. Although, 20% haven't or are not sure. So hopefully after today, you will understand a little bit more about what it is, how it might affect you, and of course, some strategies for overcoming it. Let me just say a couple quick words about imposter syndrome. It was coined by Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. I hope I'm not killing those names. And they were psychologists, 2 psychologists in the 1970s. They did some studies mostly on high achieving people. So this was also, of course, not in today's light of things that we know now in terms of microaggressions and racism. So, the findings have different implications now, I think, than they did in the 70s. But a couple of basic things. It affects men and women, although majority of the people who it affects are women. It happens mostly at work, but it doesn't have to be at work. And 2 famous people who have admitted having imposter syndrome are Maya Angelou and Albert Einstein. Those are probably the 2 most famous people. It's not a medical diagnosis, but it is a very real feeling that can definitely have some negative consequences. With that said, I am going to move the next slide, and at least try to. And I'm just realizing something. Did you guys see the results after all that? I think you did. Okay, it made it still an option. And there we go. So I'm going to turn the next slide over to Michelle and have her speak to this before we run our next poll.
All right, so welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you could join us today. And so when we talk about imposter syndrome, I know I did see a note in the chat that somebody says, why is it a syndrome? Well, we didn't name it that. That's just what it's named. But we're going to go with not an actual diagnosis. but it's that voice in your head. It's that little thing that you hear that tries to discount your success. It's like the feelings of inadequacy that we have that persist even though we are successful. It's that time that every time you get up to speak or present or to, give a project or do something, it's that little crazy voice that says, who do you think you are? What's going on? Um, even though we may be confident and a high achiever, it still comes, and we're not really sure why it comes. Well, I think actually we're going to learn a little bit about why it comes today, but I'm curious to know for you all on the chat, on the webinar today, what does that voice say to you? What are some of the things that you hear? What is it about you that makes you feel like, you wanted to learn more about this imposter syndrome, or that you needed some help overcoming it? What I've heard too is that it does affect mostly high achieving women. And they say about over 70% of people experience it. So it's really interesting that we have this experience, even though we have so much success in the room, yet people are still sort of questioning it. So Paula, I think you have another poll for us. Let's see what the ladies and gentlemen think, what some of the thoughts are that describe the feelings that they have. And let's see who we have in the room here.
Excellent. Let me do that.
Mhm.
I'm launching it now.
All right.
So we'll give it about a minute, and if you could respond to one of the 5 answers. And I'm going to read out the answers because I realize people in the recording won't see this, I don't think. I always feel like a fraud is answer A. Answer 2 is I often question my qualifications. Answer 3 is I sometimes feel that I am unworthy. Answer 4 is I have felt like an imposter on occasion. Number 5 is I rarely experience any feelings of self-doubt. And it looks like people are madly answering, so I will give it a little bit more time.
Yeah,
and let's see.
I think that what's winning is I question my qualifications. Seems to be the winner here.
So far, and I think I'm bad at math, so I don't want to add all these numbers quickly. I'll give it 10 more seconds, and then we'll end the poll.
It's often, like a lot of us are often.
Yes. Okay. So I think it kind of stopped.
Great.
Yeah, it's a large number, so I'm going to end the poll. Yeah. And then I'm going to share results.
Perfect.
And everyone hopefully should see them.
Very cool, yeah.
So I often question my qualifications. So there's another suggestion with imposter syndrome that it's sort of similar, where people that have it are also considered perfectionists or have trouble with the word expert because they sort of take that realistically. And so that kind of makes sense that we would question our qualifications, because there's always more to learn, or maybe you're not quite enough, or there's something else that I could be better at in order to be considered an expert. And if they realize that I don't know it all, then, oh my God, I've been exposed as a fraud. And these are some of the natural feelings and thoughts that sort of come into our heads. And this is why we're here today, to talk about this. And so I think I want to just hand it over to Alana, who's going to talk a little bit about where it comes from.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing the poll. I do see some people had the comments about there could have been more answers. I agree, but I had more and tried to chop it down for simplicity. And I also noticed someone picked up on my comment about being mad at math, and I agree. I don't like to do math under pressure is much more of a specific statement. That's correct. So I'm going to stop sharing and then ask Alana to pick it up, and I'm going to slide to the next slide for you. There we go.
Thank you. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everyone. It's great to see familiar faces and so many people joining us today. I only have 7 to 10 minutes, so I'm going to try to do a very quick overview on where does this come from. What we have on the slide here is our upbringing, environment and work culture, and the brain. So very quickly, I think it's really important to say that it doesn't come from one source for any of us. It's really more of a complex situation, and it's important not to blame either yourself or externally. It is a human condition for all of us to be unsure at times. We all have insecurities. So sometimes we feel like if we have any insecurities, this is imposter syndrome, but there's not one person on the planet that's not insecure sometimes, but it's those inner saboteurs. It's the voices that really get in our way of advancement, of our accomplishment, that's when we really want to catch it. So particular to imposter syndrome, as my colleagues have said, it is high achievers and trouble internalizing our success, and often suffer in silence. It's not like you can recognize someone often with imposter syndrome because it's high achievers and you won't often know it. It often also shows up when people are trying new things, like in graduate school or a new career or in a new job in a new environment. So when we look at family, and obviously that's my expertise and a deep interest, we tend to see that the parenting, the type of parenting that people have had who really struggle with imposter syndrome is a mix of overpraise combined with criticism. So the overpraise might not be for anything legitimate, and then you're criticized. So people don't have their own internal sense of how they're doing because this external measure is kind of all over the place. So that's one pattern they've recognized. You might also see parenting where somebody comes home with the A- and where's the A, or here's the A, where's the A+. So you're driven towards perfectionism. There may be explicit or implicit messages in the family about the role of women. I would never see a woman doctor. I wouldn't see a woman financial advisor. So when you become that, imprinted in your brain from childhood are messages about what women can or cannot do, or should or shouldn't do. The environment truly and society complicates everything from the messages we've had growing up. And I think Paula mentioned this, when we differ, whether by race or gender, sexual orientation, or any characteristic from people around us, it can fuel a sense of being a fraud. So a sense of belonging really can foster confidence. And so because we know about systemic and institutionalized discrimination and bias and racism, we often don't see people, for women, people of color, people with differently abled, if you don't see people like you, what message is that sending about you? Now, confidence should not be confused with competence. However, society sends certain messages which may complicate and does complicate messages that we may have grown up with. There's also questions about, I see people from my HR role saying, well, that person's not very professional. Well, what professionalism looks like is also a biased phrase. In addition, we also see work cultures that are not supportive and developmental, right? Where you're not encouraged to make mistakes. We see work cultures that are a little bit more gotcha. You feel like your boss is just waiting for you to make a mistake. And if you're working in a gotcha culture, you're always going to feel more on edge, or maybe I'm not the expert. I always say, I've been in HR and as a career coach for, many years, but in HR for about 16. And sometimes I still say I play an HR person on TV because I've learned a lot. I've grown a lot. My background's in counseling and organizational development, but do I feel like a real HR person? Not all the time, but depending on the type of boss I have or environment I'm in, there are moments that I may feel very confident in what I'm doing, and others, when I'm up against the lawyers, that I may feel like, well, I guess I'm not really an HR person. So it can also happen in moments and not as a general experience. So the last thing I want to mention, and just back to the workplace, we really have to fix the workplaces. We have to fix bias in the workplaces, not necessarily women, but we also have to empower women, which is what we're doing today, so that we can change the way the thinking goes. that will change the outcome. So the last thing I want to mention is the brain and our neural pathways and the way they work. You know, it's like riding a bike. The brain just knows what to do. There's a great video on YouTube about people at different ages learning to ride a bike backwards and how the kids can learn more easily because you're retraining the brain. When it comes to imposter syndrome, you know, our brains are wired to work a certain way, and, you know, it's easier to process it. So we make sense of our environment the way we've always made sense of our environment. But what we know about neuroplasticity is that our brain does have the ability to create new neural pathways. And to do that, we have to do things differently. We have to practice thinking in new ways. And then the underlying thoughts and habits can change. So we really wanted to go into today empowering you with really these steps that you can reframe the messages. We're not going to end all the messages that have come up since birth and that our environment still. This morning I said to a colleague, it's International Women's Day and we've come so far. And she said, but we have so much further to go. And both are true. So we're really going to just wanted to lay this framework so that we can really help you in new ways to reframe messages so it doesn't interfere with advancement or whatever you want. So it's been really a great pleasure to be here with the colleagues, and I look forward to moving into our action. And I'll be able to answer questions both in the Q&A later and in the group. So little background for you.
Excellent. Thank you for that great summary. Although, as I mentioned, it could be a whole nother workshop, but
Sure.
you definitely synthesized it well for us to be able to move forward in the presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Lynn now to walk us through the content of the exercise that we are going to do.
Thank you, Paula. And thanks, Alana. That background is so helpful. We're going to talk about a method that we recommend and that works for many of us for tackling and managing imposter syndrome when the voices come into your head, that inner voice of self-doubt. So the 3 steps are really easy. First is to recognize those thoughts. The second is to reflect on the thought, question its validity, and probe a little bit on the backstory for it. And then third is to reframe that thought. So what we're going to do is we're going to split into different groups, smaller groups, and we're going to each of us think about a time in which we had a thought of imposter syndrome. And then we're going to talk through an exercise where we use these 3 steps to address and then reframe the imposter syndrome thoughts. It may, I just want to throw out a few ideas. It may be a situation in which you were new to a new job. It may be a situation in which you were in a room and you were the only woman or the only person of color or the only woman of color in the room. It might be a situation in which you found yourself operating at a level of expertise that was the first time you had reached that level. These are all great examples. So be thinking about what an example might be for you. And then we are going to be splitting out into breakout rooms. We're going to probably have about 25 minutes. So feel free to be thinking about what your example might be. And then the facilitators in each group will help talk you through the process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lynn. I am going to be opening up the rooms momentarily. So you will all move into 6 different rooms. And each of our co-hosts will be leading one of those rooms and going through this exercise in a bit more detail. Then we'll regroup back up in about, 20 or so minutes. I will be sending out broadcasts to help everyone stay on track. So once everyone's in the groups, I will send out broadcast number 1, and then in 5 minutes later, broadcast number 2, then 5 minutes later, broadcast number 3, and then you'll get a 60-second warning when I'm bringing everyone back in. So have fun with it.
Yep, and if you're watching the recording, you can pause and just go through the exercise yourself.
Yes, thank you. In fact, I am going to pause recording myself. Okay, so I ended the breakout rooms and people are slowly coming back. Yeah.
We were
Okay,
in the
little
middle
by
of
little.
conversations, Paula. Oh, we would have loved a bit more time.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
I'm
didn't get to
sure.
the last one that much, actually.
I'm
Listen,
sorry
really
to
great
those who were cut
discussion.
off in
Yeah.
mid-sentence.
Such good
Oh,
discussion. Such good
yeah.
discussion.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I guess, should I throw everyone back in a room?
No, we're great. No, it was nice to have a chance to talk with everyone.
Okay, so maybe we needed a little bit longer. That's good to know for next time. I don't think everyone's quite back yet. I think we're waiting for Karen, for one, to lead the debrief. And I think that,
No, I'm here.
oh, you are,
We're
okay.
all back.
Okay.
I'm
Is
here.
everyone back? Are all
Yep.
the co-hosts back?
We're all
I
back.
think let's go for it.
Okay, excellent. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Karen, and mute myself. And if everyone else could mute themselves while Karen talks, that'd be great.
Well, everybody except Sharzad, because Sharzad's up first. So I think one of the ways we want to process it is just to ask each of the group leads to highlight 2 or 3 of the little gems. I know there were lots, like I have notes here of all these great things that people were saying, but just 2 or 3 of the things, the important takeaways that you noticed in your group. And I suspect we'll start to hear some commonalities, but also some expansion. So Sharzad, why don't you kick it off?
Thank you. Well, the first thing I'll say is we didn't actually have 5 minutes for the last activity. So the first 2 were done, and we kind of combined 2 and 3 a little bit. The themes that I noticed were the ideas of not feeling either like you have the qualifications or the expertise for where you are and what you're doing, or that others are giving you the message that I'm not quite sure if you're up to this, I don't know if you have the expertise that I'm expecting. And so a combination of that, and then the themes of wanting to really be seen as having the answers, to be helpful, not just to be seen as having the answers, but because you want to be helpful, because you want to be able to deliver perfectly and help to the best of your ability, having really high expectations of yourself as well as to what that means, and then discounting what we do have. So if you're a lot of the themes centered around transitioning maybe to a new field or graduating from school and starting something new, and the idea that kind of starting from zero and that everything I've done before doesn't matter, or I can't count it. And then some reframing, which we were starting to do around, well, maybe everyone else is feeling the same way. And starting to think about all that you do bring into the picture. And thanks to everyone in the team that you guys did a great job.
All right, Lynn,
Excellent.
your gems.
We had some great conversation. So thanks to everyone who was in the same group as I was. We talked a little bit about what it means to know that your experience is unique and that unique experience has value that you bring in and of itself, even if you may not have the external credential that you might worry about that maybe some other folks have. But where you've been and what you've experienced has that value. We talked about reframing our feelings of perhaps not being ready for what we're facing. And we talked about being comfortable saying, I don't know the answer, and how being able to say, I don't know the answer can actually be very freeing. And then finally, I just want to add that as a first-gen college student, there was a member of our group that said that she did think about the motto, faking it till you make it. And we talked a little bit about what it meant to say fake it until you become it, and what the distinction of that might look like for us. It was a great conversation.
Great, thank you. And yet that was a theme in ours too, is you can ask, you don't have to know everything. All right, Michelle, what were your gems?
Okay, so our group, we had some very similar themes to everyone else, but I would say our most common theme was not feeling like we deserved to be there or belong, didn't have enough knowledge or credentials to be in the space. And most of the sort of comments around the situation were like career change, coming into something new, writing a book, presenting a topic, attending a school, different times where it might be your first time entering into this space and not feeling, that I belong here. So we were just getting good into the reframing. when we had to go, but we talked about, you know, switching language from negative to positive. And forgive me, Jen, I don't remember what you said about it's sort of for every positive or for every negative language or word, what's the opposite or the positive that you can shift it to help in case you're kind of getting stuck with changing your language. So I thought that was really helpful.
That was counter statements. It was counter
Yes,
statements.
counter statements. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Counter statements. And then we got a nice tip from Marilyn that said, you know, when people, because we were talking about listening to our own reviews and reading reviews on, you know, your books or your presentations and getting stuck on that one that said, oh, I already knew that, or that's just common sense. To look at that as, well, that's amazing. Yes, it is common sense. And it's wonderful that everybody else knows it, but clearly I'm here for a reason. You know, if everybody were doing it, then I wouldn't be here to discuss it. So seeing that as sort of confirmation that you're in the right place. So I'm sure we could have gotten so much more, but that was probably the quickest gem I can share from our group. And thank you all for participating.
Great, thank you. Alana, what were your favorite gems in your group?
Thanks, Karen. And what an interesting group. A lot of psychologists and career professionals. We had a nice discussion. So there were two themes that were really interesting that I hadn't really explored in the where does it come from. One is that there were many people who are little sisters and experience the birth order as sort of showing up to spaces forever as that little sister, feeling like somebody knows more. You're sort of competing with that, have to prove yourself. And that's a theme that may carry through your whole life in terms of birth order. So I thought that was really interesting that it came up as a theme, not just one person, but a theme in the group. The other thing is the theme that came up is people for whom English is not their first language or not from this country being sort of told their whole lives they're exotic or feeling like their English the fluidity may not make them look as professional, even though they may not have what some, you know, an accent is only an accent if you're here, right? When you're somewhere else, it's someone else's accent. But the idea, again, of not sounding like, looking like everybody else brings some self-consciousness. So those were two themes in the group. The suggestions on the reframe I loved. We talked about, and shout out to Margie for talking about sort of owning your superpowers, that you can look at your superpower and how you're different as something to be insecure about or where there's sort of a light shining on you. But if you can own that superpower and use it for good, then how great is that? Because then you're differentiating yourself based on the strengths and the difference than feeling insecure about that. So I think that's a fabulous tip for all of us, is to look at our strengths, because no two people are alike, and there's no one right way to do anything. Even the boss's way is not, there's no right way. They may have the power, but we can really combat that by looking at our own superpowers, owning it, and then bringing that into the workforce, whatever difference that may be. And I just love that theme. So thank you to Group 5 for really a rich discussion that also could have gone on a long time.
I think they all could have gone on a long time.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say something to the, English not a first language. Trevor Noah's stand-up sets are really fun, but one of the things he did a little bit on accents, and he said, an accent is simply someone applying the rules of their language to another language. That is what an accent is. And I thought that was like a beautiful reframe. That was just a beautiful reframe of an accent. The rules of their own language applied to another one.
Thank you, Karen. That's great.
So Ruth, I'm going to ask you to share your gems.
Yes, and I'm the one with the accent. I'm German, but in America, they always say, oh, you're so British. It's always a conversation starter. So we had two themes, I think, that came out. And one was very much about the structural environment, the structural factors impacting on experiencing imposter syndrome. And so we were discussing, what are the environments where we feel it more or where we feel it less? And I think that's an very important observation. And I know you went into this as well. We're in an environment, and depending on the environment, we also react to it. And so Medea, she was talking about, being in an environment that is creative and where you're free to do your best work and where people are not always questioning you, that is a completely different place. And you probably have imposter syndrome a lot less because you're being trusted and not always have to batter against a system. And so we talk a lot about, organizational culture, what's the right environment where we can be free to do well and not have these moments where we feel like we're fraudulent or not in the right place. And then the other thing we discussed was when you're starting something new, this is this theme, isn't it? That's when it often comes, this feeling of I'm not good enough, why am I here, all these kind of things. And it was Laura who talked about the strategy. And if you start a new job or a new role, how do you frame that you're new to other people so that you don't look like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but you're saying, okay, I've worked in many other organizations, I have a lot of experience, but obviously this organization is new to me. What are your tips? And so you're positioning yourself, bringing your expertise in so that people value you as who you are. But of course, everyone who starts something new brings questions. And so but it's that positioning piece at the beginning that changes the whole situation. So we don't feel like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing here, I need to ask for help, because that's not what it is. It's wanting to be, as effective and impactful as quickly, hit the ground running, and you will need help for that. And the last gem was, and it's the continuous story, isn't it, about don't be afraid to ask for help, because there will always be people who want to support you. And we had a lovely conversation, so thank you so much for that. That was really exciting.
Yeah, this is something I noticed from last year. Like, these are really quick. We're not, we're barely an hour in, and just how much sort of work and value. And again, because it's mostly women on here, guys, you're so welcome to be here. But there is sort of that collaborative energy and support, which makes this event one of my favorites of the year. So I'm going to share a few things that came out in my group, a little out of order. Somebody used a great word that I thought really encapsulated sort of how imposter syndrome plays around with our head. And what they said was, all of my successes have just been flukes. Right? And this is a tendency to globalize success. That is, we just assume that it was lucky, and to personalize anything that goes wrong. It's my fault. And so, that's a factor that plays into imposter syndrome, I think. Like, yes, I have these things that I've been successful at, but that was just a fluke. I couldn't do it again. Somebody else, Jill, brought this up in the group, and she said, I experience imposter syndrome in my body. I am uncomfortable when I don't feel like I belong, or I don't feel that I have something to offer up. And what she observed was, not to take the discomfort in the body as an immediate signal to retreat, but just to realize that it's okay. I can be a little uncomfortable. I can be a little sweaty palmed, and I can still move forward. I thought that was a really nice takeaway. Someone else, and again, I haven't heard this mentioned yet, someone else said, I fall back on my faith. I turn to my faith and, and sort of like reach into that.
That was me.
and trust, right? And trust that
God.
There's something, right? Let go and let God, right? There's something bigger there that's supporting me. And that is a nice segue into the final point that came out as we were talking about the reframes. One of the things that lots of people in the group really, really liked was this notion of, I do not have to do this alone. I don't have to know it all. I can ask questions. I can ask for help. I'm entitled to be at this table. Doesn't mean I need to be alone at this table. And I thought that was a really nice reframe too. And like everyone else, it was like so much fun. It was way too short, but it was so much fun to be with everyone in the group. So I am now going to turn it back to Paula, because that's, I think, that's what we all got out of this.
Excellent. Thank you for the debrief, Karen, and to each of the facilitators for sharing what happened in your group. I'm bummed. I did pop into one group, and then I realized this is way too much multitasking. I think I have to just hang around in the main room. Yeah, so thank you for doing that work, everyone on the team and all of the participants too, because it wouldn't have been so much fun if no one had shared anything in the meeting, in the breakout groups. I'm going to turn it over to Ruth now to kind of wrap up some takeaway tips that you can use besides the method, the 3-step method that we shared, some other concrete tips that will help you when you're trying to overcome imposter syndrome.
Okay, so these are tips that all of us who worked on this piece together have tried out. And I think one thing I'm absolutely convinced, and it's taken me decades of reaching to this conclusion, it will never go away. So whenever I try something new or when something's really challenging, there is this sneaky feeling coming in, you know, and I just decided, I notice it, I acknowledge it, and then I decide, okay, I just have to move through it. And that's really been helpful in recognizing it. You know, I don't think you can really overcome it. I mean, I speak to so many incredibly, you know, talented, high profile women, and they all say, I have it, you know, and you think, really? You know, I think it's just something, whenever we push ourselves to do something new, something challenging, you know, it will come. And for me, it's just, okay, let's get on with it. Let's not stop it. Let's not let it stop us in doing what we want to do. And then I think it's very interesting to keep thinking, you know, why am I doing this? Where am I taking this? We're all on a journey, and it helps to really think, you know, how long we've come, but also seeing where am I going with this? And we will never ever just plain, you know, sail through it. Plain sailing doesn't exist in life, does it? You know, so envision that future, having something positive. Why am I doing this? How am I doing this? I'm here to learn. And love yourself as you are. You know, that can take a while to do. But at the end, you know, we all have our pluses, we all have our challenges, and that's okay. You know, we're human beings. And so accepting oneself, and we're always on a journey. I think for me and for us in the group, I think that has made a really big difference, hasn't it? And then the theme that came up a lot tonight was, or lunchtime for you in the US, you know, seek support. You know, we're not alone. I mean, the fact, you know, that we had 180 people sign up and we still have 100 people on here in an hour into our session, you know, we're not alone, and we're here to support each other. There were lots of lovely comments in the chat about people acknowledging each other, helping each other, and really understanding where we're coming from. And that is very, very powerful. And that is really also what International Women's Day is all about. And what a shame it's not every day, isn't it? And yeah, I'm sure you have the same sentiment when you ask, you know, how did you get that far? You know, very, very often it was with a mentor, or even more ideally with a sponsor, because I know there are some people who say, well, mentors are all good and well, but what you really need is someone in the organization championing you and taking you forward. And so I think both ideas are great. Space is someone who's on your side and you can learn from, and opens doors for you, and is there for you, and doesn't judge you, and really steps in. And I mean, I've mentored a lot in my industry, and I can say, you know, if you're hesitant about asking someone, there's nothing more rewarding than helping people along and seeing them grow. So don't ever hesitate to, you know, find a mentor and get some mentoring, or find a sponsor and get that sponsorship. And then the last one is, you know, find that community. I'm sure we'll do something again next year, but we don't want to wait for another year. Do we find the community, you know? And then this thing about, you know, comparing is dangerous, because what we always do is comparing ourselves to what we haven't got, you know. So it's about, don't compare, don't compete, collaborate. And there are organizations out there who really want to develop a much more collaborative environment, and I think these are the organizations that we need to look for. So being very clear about, where do I do my best work, where can I be who I am, and where can I make the biggest difference. And that's something that we all as career professionals you know, work a lot on, don't we? So these were our top tips, and thank you so much for all your fantastic ideas and suggestions and strategies that you shared so openly. So thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Appreciate that wrap up. And I want to thank everyone for being here today, especially all of the co-hosts with me, everyone on the team, Karen, Alana, Sherazad, Michelle, Lynn, and Ruth. It's Ruth, it's dinner time for Ruth, so her day is ending. I know a lot of us have been in other, I know Michelle's got another International Women's Day event to run to after this. So just really appreciate everyone on the panel taking time today to be with us and leading and facilitating the groups and then sharing the rich nuggets. I would also like to thank everyone for being here, all of the attendees from men, women, and everyone who's here today from around the world. I think that I wish I had given a little bit more time, and I did have my timer set, but I swear it was 5 minutes, but I'm sure it felt like 1. And just remember the takeaways from today: to recognize when you are feeling imposter syndrome, reflect on what is happening, and then reframe it in a more positive and productive and useful way. We hope that you were able to take away a lot of useful tips today. I will say that I will admit that in preparing for this event, I did have pangs of imposter syndrome because I had never done breakout groups before. And I want to give a quick shout out to Elizabeth Sanders Park because I took her virtual training course, virtual trainer in December, which introduced me to a lot of these things. But she actually helped me practice last week. And my family also supported me and helped me practice. And of course, the team of co-hosts, we practiced as well. So I really echo that support. I felt supported the entire time, and that made it possible. But was I scared? Yes, I will admit that. But I think it went through as a success. And I think that our efforts today show you that women can support women and we can hold each other up. And as the tide rises, all boats rise, and just trying to keep those things in mind. As we end, I'll just say a couple things. Again, if you really enjoyed today and you want to donate to kiva.org or womenforwomen.org, that would be great. And just supporting other women around the world and empowering them. Again, happy International Women's Day to everyone, and have fun with whatever the rest of your plans are today. And as a final note, we will be sending the recording and a handout. We're not going to actually send the PowerPoint. Karen made an awesome 2-page handout that summarizes all the PowerPoints, so it'll be a smaller file size and all of that. And we will be getting to those to you. I forgot to thank Lynn for setting up all the Eventbrite. So Lynn made the image, which we all loved, as the stock, not the stock image, but the image that you see on the Eventbrite page, and the image that comes up when anyone's sharing with social media. And again, if you want to share this recording with anyone later, it will be going on my YouTube as fast as possible. I can't promise exactly, give me a week maybe. I'm gonna open it just before we end finally. It's 1:08, so we do have a couple more minutes. We had said 75 minutes. Is there anyone on the panel who would like to unmute and just share any closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
Thanks, Paula. I just want to say that every group of women, every initiative needs a leader. And Paula, you've just been a rock star in vision and execution, and none of us would be here if it weren't for you. So just a cheers to you.
Thank you.
So really a pleasure and an honor to be really with all of you and on this panel. So thank you so much, Paula.
You're very welcome. I'm going to admit something also besides the imposter syndrome. I realized I had to work through the imposter syndrome. Was that what I was feeling? And I realized that while I am a good leader, it's not my favorite thing to do. And so I don't mind the organizing people and resources and being like the project manager. But I think I realized through this experience of preparing for this event that leadership might be a burnout skill for me. I can do it, but I don't love doing it. So that was a personal insight for me. Even with all the support, I just realized at moments like, why am I not enjoying this? It's not because I feel like an imposter. At the points it was. But at points it was like, I don't want to be the heavy. I don't want to be the final word. I don't want to be the decision maker. I like things more in teams. And Michelle's daughter actually helped me come to that realization. So that was an insight for me, a little bit of a side note. Anyone else want to share anything from the panel?
I'll just, in our panel, we talked about how important it is to just recognize sort of what we're hearing in our heads, because until it becomes conscious, we can't act on it. So we can't change imposter syndrome unless we are aware of it. But it's also important to become aware of, the parts of us that are telling us other truths, like the one you just highlighted, Paula. Like, I can do this, happy to do it, but it's not my favorite. I might be looking for other ways to collaborate.
That was a huge insight for me. I've been president of many groups, and it took this long for me to realize. I get sucked in because I'm really organized. I like to be helpful, but that doesn't mean you have to do it. Michelle?
Michelle, we talked a little bit about the triggers that set off the feeling of imposter syndrome. And one of the triggers that came up in our group was being challenged. If someone asks you a question, or even the perception of being challenged. And I know for me personally, I related to that one because I think, I thought it was very interesting about the whole birth order thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a firstborn, you do have to always sort of be right and be the leader. And being challenged means maybe you're not being as good at that as you are expected to be. And so I just, I understand now that in my recognizing, I'm looking now more so for the triggers that set off that imposter voice in my head and look for ways to reframe that. So that was my little learning.
Excellent. Anyone else want to share?
I just want to say I love that, Michelle. And I think, it goes to show you that this is a lifelong journey for all of us, right? So we have insights at every stage and age of our career and with our families. And as we move through, you're the little sister forever, but then you look at how, this shows up in the next generation. So it's a lifelong process of awareness and growing and learning.
Excellent. Okay, I realize that we're coming in on 75 minutes, and we want to honor your time. And if you get 4 minutes back, well, maybe you'll do something fun with it.
Can I say something?
Oh, sure. Yep, Ruth.
I just want to say I'm looking at Meet the Panel.
Oh, Margie. Okay.
I'm looking at Meet the Panel. I'm looking at all the initials after everybody's name, and that's giving me imposter syndrome. After my name. That's all I want to say. Goodbye.
As Karen always said, you don't need another certification. You don't need another degree. That is a quote from Karen, straight from the horse's mouth. Very good. Well, I'm going to wrap it up formally and stop the recording. And again, just thank everyone for being here.